A letter believed to have been sent by Jeffrey Epstein to Larry Nassar in 2019 reportedly mentioned the US president at the time, Donald Trump. The US Department of Justice quickly denied the authenticity of the letter, stating that its contents were unreliable and speculative. At the same time, internal documents indicate that Donald Trump flew on Epstein's private jet multiple times during the 1990s, including trips alongside Ghislaine Maxwell and women described as potential witnesses in the Maxwell case. These details directly contradict Maxwell's earlier testimony, in which she claimed that Trump had no contact with Epstein's victims. As political pressure intensified, the DOJ not only rejected the alleged letter, but also publicly declared that accusations targeting Trump in the Epstein files were sensationalized and baseless, a rare move for an agency widely viewed as independent. Congress, including several lawmakers from the Republican Party, began considering coercive measures, even the possibility of holding the DOJ in contempt of Congress, arguing that the department was failing to properly enforce the Epstein transparency law, Ikunaos. All of these developments have led to a central question now hanging over Washington. If there is nothing more serious being concealed in the Epstein files, why would the Trump administration choose to prolong this crisis, despite the mounting political cost? A subsequent testimony from victims has painted a far more troubling picture. Some said they were invited to parties as guests of Donald Trump while they were still minors. Others recalled that no identification was checked, alcohol was freely served, and that a single glass of champagne was enough to leave them dizzy and disoriented. Several described Trump as not merely present, but engaging in suggestive and inappropriate behavior that went well beyond social boundaries. These testimonies do not exist in isolation. They connect directly to internal DOJ records related to Epstein's private flights. According to these files, Donald Trump flew with Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell at least 8 times between 1993 and 1996. Some of those flights included women later described as potential witnesses in the Maxwell case. This again directly contradicts Maxwell's prior testimony that Trump never interacted with Epstein's victims. This contradiction is not a minor detail. If Trump was present on those flights, in a confined space, alongside Epstein, Maxwell, and women later identified as victims or witnesses, then the argument that Trump was merely a peripheral acquaintance collapses. The question is no longer did Trump know, but rather what did Trump see? Where was he? And what did he do in those circumstances? Ghislaine Maxwell sits at the center of these questions. For years, her image was deliberately blurred, portrayed as little more than a scheduler or social assistant in Epstein's world. But Maxwell's conviction completely dismantled that portrayal. She was a direct sexual offender, actively involved in recruiting, manipulating, and abusing victims. And that is precisely why her transfer to a low-security facility, under conditions described as unusually lenient given the nature of her crimes, has triggered intense suspicion. Why would a convicted sex offender receive treatment that even many nonviolent inmates do not? Why would Maxwell, a person holding vast knowledge about Epstein and his network, be placed in an environment with less risk, less pressure, and less incentive to cooperate? For those closely following the case, the answer is not difficult to infer. Maxwell is not just a defendant, but an information bomb. And keeping that bomb from detonating may matter more to Trump than any short-term political damage. From this point on, serious legal questions begin to pile up. Did Donald Trump directly participate in acts of abuse? Did he use his status, reputation, or power to intimidate or silence victims or witnesses? Did he obstruct justice, conceal evidence, or influence how Maxwell was handled? The critical issue is not that these questions have been answered, it is that they have never been fully and independently investigated. Instead, what the public has witnessed is a DOJ releasing the Epstein files in a drip-feed manner, heavily redacting nearly all sensitive sections, and even openly declaring that material involving Trump is fabricated and groundless. This is an extraordinary posture for a Justice Department that is supposed to operate independently, particularly when Trump himself leads the executive branch. That rush to shield rather than diffuse has only amplified suspicions of a coordinated cover-up. When all of these pieces are placed side by side, the Epstein-Nassar letter, victim testimony, flight records, Maxwell's role, and the DOJ's response, a cold logic begins to emerge. Donald Trump is not concealing what is already known. He is concealing what has not yet been released. What Trump fears most is not a single document, but the chain reaction. Each new disclosure leads to another witness, another question, another link in the power network that protected Epstein for years. And that chain reaction is precisely what no media strategy or official statement can fully control. This brings us back to the central question: why would Trump accept a prolonged crisis? Conventional political logic suggests that every day of delay only makes things worse. But as many analysts have bluntly noted, there is one exception, when the truth is worse than the accusation of a cover-up itself, when the less painful option is enduring criticism for delay rather than allowing the entire file to be exposed. Here again, Ghislaine Maxwell reemerges as the key node. She is not just someone who knows things, she is someone who can connect them, from flights to parties, from private rooms to lists of who was present, who saw, and who knew. Maxwell's continued silence, combined with her special detention conditions, makes the possibility of an implicit arrangement difficult to ignore. This leads to a long-term political consequence that many may be underestimating. Even if Trump is no longer in the White House, acts of obstruction of justice, if proven, do not simply disappear. Statutes of limitation do not end with a presidency. A different administration, with a different DOJ, could reopen the entire case. And officials who participated in delays, redactions, or the disregard of transparency laws could face personal legal liability. That is why some lawmakers insist this case is not only about Trump, it is about precedent. If an administration can openly sidestep a transparency law because it is politically inconvenient, then faith in the rule of law erodes in ways that may not be reversible. Epstein, in this picture, is no longer the center. He becomes a symbol of a network that existed for too long without full scrutiny. And as that network begins to surface piece by piece, through an unverified letter, a previously overlooked flight, a once dismissed testimony, and the instinctive response of power is to narrow the light, not widen it. But US political history shows that light tends to seep through the smallest cracks. Every released document, even heavily redacted, generates more questions. Every question draws out more potential witnesses. And every potential witness raises the cost of continuing the cover-up. At this point, the Epstein-Trump story is no longer a personal scandal. It has become a test of the entire system, whether the law truly applies equally, or whether political power is strong enough to delay the truth indefinitely. There is no final answer yet,